Hello everyone and welcome to my little corner of the internet. My name's Michael and I'm bitten by radioactive book. I'm also recording this whole video for the second time because the first time I had the wrong microphone selected and there's no sound on the video. So 35 minutes whoop, into the bin. But without further ado, we're getting into the 8 books I've read in January, and let's see how I like them. So the first book that I've read in January was The Forever Sea by Joshua Palmer Johnson, I think he's called. This is a very interesting world we're living in because we have like a huge maritime story, but without water. Because the Forever Sea, the name-giving Forever Sea of the book, is a large prairie, but with a lot of deep ocean as well, and we don't know what is under the sea. The ships are held afloat by some fire magic, and these ships need keepers that sing to the fire and therefore change the course or give more power to the ship, things like that. And we're following our main character Kindred, and she is a junior keeper on a ship, and she learned to interact with the fire from her grandmother, and her grandmother seems to have gone into the sea. So she learns very early on that her grandmother has passed away because she apparently did suicide by jumping from a ship into the sea, and we don't know what is actually below the sea. This is one of the secrets maybe of the series. We have a very interesting narrative framework for the story because the story of Kindred is actually told by a narrator, and the narrator comes to a village that might be below the sea, and talks to the people there and tells them the story of Kindred. So we make certain pauses within the narrative where it goes back to the narrator or the storyteller, and we see what his story is about. And that was really weird in a good way, because you know that he's not telling you some things about this world, and you only hear that in little bits and pieces, and it's very interesting to figure out what's going on. And I wish we had more of that story and less of the main story. And that was a little bit of the problem for me, because I think the character like Kindred and the side characters were okay but not great. I think the story, the plot was okay but moved forward too slow, and then it left me with a really interesting world building and a really good framework narrative that I want to read the second book at some point, because I want to find out what happens next, both in the story and in the framework. But overall it was something that I liked to read, but not really was super over the moon. So it was more like a 3-star read for me. Way more like a 5-star read was Golden Sun by Pierce Brown, the second installment in his Red Rising series. I think the Red Rising series is really well known on BookTube, so I don't have to go too deep into that. For those of you who don't know, in the first book we're following Darrow, who's our main character and the only POV in this space opera story, where humanity has evolved and colonized planets like Mars and others, but not vastly expanded, at least from what I know so far. And the society is split up into various castes, and these castes are all like genetically enhanced to do the job that they do in society, like soldiers and people who fly starships and ships and people who are in the entertainment business, stuff like that. And the lowest caste, like a worker caste, are the rats, and Darrow belongs to that caste, and there are certain events why he is on revenge against the Golds, and that he gets involved with like a revolutionary part of society, of red society, that is able to genetically change him into a Gold so he can infiltrate their like society. And in the first book we have like a typical school setting where he goes through the motions there, and it's really well done. And in the second book now we step away from that, get more into like greater politics with various houses. We have huge starship battles, battles on the ground of planets. New characters get introduced, older characters evolve a little bit the relationship with them, and Darrow changes both in like good ways for Darrow, sometimes like bad ways for Darrow, and this is executed really well. There's excellent pacing in this book, and Pierce Brown is always able to surprise you. I think that is something he does really, really well. Like a magician, you're really immersed into what is happening right now, and there's like little surprises here and there in what's happening right now. And then when you're so immersed into it and your attention is so on that what's happening right now, then he's like smash, and something totally different happens and turns you around and spins you in another direction. And this is not overdone, and this is not underdone. Once again, exactly well paced, and yeah, it's a blast. There's characters that are so over the top that it shouldn't work, like in a serious environment, and it still does. There's like cringe-worthily dialogue in there, and it still like works, as that, like how over the top some of the things are. Ragnar, I'm looking at you. Yeah, so it's a very excellent read. I had a blast, and I hope to get to Morning Star, the third book, and the like finish of the first trilogy in the series in February. Now, going to the third read that I finished, this was the first reread I did this month. It's The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington. It's the first installment in his Lycanius trilogy. I've read that in 2018 but never followed up with the series, and as much as I enjoyed The Will of the Many last year, it was my number 2 read of 2023, I was like, okay, I should get back into the Lycanius trilogy, because that's a finished trilogy by James Islington, and I wanted to read that and finish that, and therefore I reread the first book. We're following like 3 main protagonists in a world where they are able to use the magic in the world, but mages are like frowned upon, or the people who can use magic, and they're very like limited of what they can do and are allowed to do, and are like supervised in some kind of schools. And we're following like 3 main protagonists who are in this school setting in the beginning, but like rather quickly move out and get separated, and we follow their stories. It was really really well done. Had about the same enjoyment as I had when I read it the first time, so it was a 4-star read for me. And it was good that I reread the book, because in hindsight I remembered a lot of the bits and pieces from the first half of the book, but almost none from the second half of the book. And now it was a good decision to do that reread so I can move on with the series. I don't know if I can follow up with like a whole second book in February. We'll see about that. Now, the fourth book I've read in January was God Killer by Hannah Kaner. Here we have a world that is filled, or was filled, with gods, but gods think more in the terms of the kami of Japanese mythology or theology, where there is a god for a river, or a god for a certain forest, or a god for the hearth fire, or something like that. And we're following our main character Kissen, and she is a god killer, so think Witcher. Kissen has like disability representation. She lost part of her leg early on in childhood and now has to wear a prosthesis. And she meets up with Inara. Inara is a noble girl, and she somehow got involved with a god, with Skadikath, who's like a bunny with antlers. In German we would say a Wolperdinger. And it's interesting to see how and why they are connected, and why Kissen is not immediately killing Skadikath, who is this god, and Skadikath is the god of white lies. So if you want to like go into your Loki itch a little bit, then Skadikath is the character for that, and both Inara and Skadikath are also point of view characters in there. And we have Ilugast. This is the final point of view, and he is a knight, or he was a knight. He is a baker now, and he was like really close to the king, King Aaron. And King Aaron was actually the one that decreed that gods should be not worshipped anymore, and he fought a war in the past against the god and the gods, and Ilugast was part of that war. And yeah, now he's living a laid-back life, and we see what brings him back from that laid-back life to do like one final mission for his king, and how he gets involved with the other four characters, or the other three characters. I really enjoyed that read. It was a 4-star read for me. Like the characters, like the world. And the second book, Sunbringer, comes out I think in March 12th or something like this, and I'm really looking forward to move on with the series then. The fifth book I finished was The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. It's the first in the Mistborn series. This is a reread for me. It is part of my Year of Cosmere project, where I want to reread all the Cosmere books to get like more condensed experience with them. I think I don't need to tell you too much about Mistborn and Brandon Sanderson and the Cosmere. Most of you will know what this is about, so I want to just say, like, compared to my first read, I didn't change like the rating. It's still like a 4-star book for me. This time around I appreciated the secondary characters a bit more. Like the first book was, or the first time I've read it, I was really like into like Wynn's story and Kelsey's story, and Saced and Elend were like the secondary characters that stood out to me more. But this time around I get like a better experience with characters like Ham or Breeze or Doxson. And I enjoyed that a lot as well. So we will move on with the Year of Cosmere in February, and going to read The Well of Ascension there. Yeah, moving on from that, we have The Martyr by Anthony Ryan, which was the 6th book I finished in January. Here we are following the story of Alvin Scribe, and in the first book he is part of a very Robin Hood-esque band of outlaws living in the forest, and then through circumstances the group gets betrayed, and he moves on to other places, meets up with a character that's very important in his life that has some kind of Jeanne d'Arc arc going on. So that is very interesting to see. I really enjoyed this series. It's a very down-to-earth, low magic world, but what makes this then so interesting is that in the back, really right, like in the background, we have some magical aspects, some prophecy aspects, and these are really, really great. They are really subtle, and they really make you think and make you really uncomfortable when reading that at some point, and this is what keeps me going, because I want to find out how this is all connected. And so on the top we have like a very good, like grim dark-ish revenge story with like interesting characters as well, that is very enjoyable on its own. But what makes it really great is this subplot that's going on in the back, and I'm super excited about that. It's a 4-star read for me, and I really like to move on to Traitor in February, which is the final installment in the Covenant of Steel series. Next up we have Babylon's Ashes by James S.A. Corey. It's the 6th installment in the 9-book Expanse series, which is one of the biggest space opera series that we have, I think, had in the last decade, or even a little bit more. I think Leviathan Wakes came out in 2012. I have to tell you my story of reading the series before I get to tell you why I rated this book 3 stars. It's 3, Michael. 3 fingers. 3 stars. So I've read the first 3 books rather quickly, maybe within 1 year. I think in 2015. And had a good reading experience, but still it was like I've rated the first book 5 stars, then second 4 stars, third was 3 stars, and then a little bit later I read the 4th book, and that was unfortunately only a 2-star book for me. I wasn't really interested where the story was going. There were new characters I wasn't interested in, and and after that I was like, oh god, I'm not super excited about this series anymore. And then in 2018 I picked up the 5th book, because I was like, oh, I should give this series another chance, because it's really well loved, and the TV show was out at this point, and I was like, oh yeah, you should move on. You are already 4 books in, and from that point where I was, it could even be like get better, and it did. But unfortunately I never followed up with the series, so it's 5.5 years since I've read the last book for me in the series, Nemesis Games, and some reviews said something very interesting about Babylon's Ashes, because they say, oh, Babylon's Ashes feels more like a very long epilogue to the events that happened in Nemesis Games. And I think Babylon's Ashes has an interesting plot on its own, but I can see that comparison, and I think that is one of the main things that let the book be only a 3-star read for me, because what the book actually does is it picks up a lot of POVs, like 12 or even more, and these are POVs that have been a POV maybe only in one book so far, maybe in book 2 or maybe in book 3. And now events happened in book 5, and we now go and catch up and see how the events affect all the characters that we have previously seen in the series. So if you read this in a very condensed way, then I think this book is way more exciting compared to my experience when I used it as the read to get back into the series. So if I would advise myself, I would say, oh, reread Nemesis games and then read Babylon's Ashes, because the experience would have been better, I think, for me. But now I'm back and established in the world, and The Expanse is one of the 10 series I want to finish this year, so the next 3 books will be read in a way more condensed way, and I hope that towards the end of the series I will get a better reading experience out of that. And the final book I've read in January is Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill. This is very traditional fantasy told in a modern style, which I really appreciated. We have like an elf popping up, I think, in the second chapter of the book. And we have all the things that I loved when I went into fantasy, like dwarves and dragons and elves and orcs, which are not called orcs but uraks, like the Uruk-hai in Tolkien. So it wears like its inspiration on its sleeve, but it does it in a very, very good way. I really enjoyed that. We mainly follow Kalen, who is a boy in a rural village, a very traditional setting, and he and his friends are going to the proving, which is some kind of manhood like thing that 18-year-olds do in this world. And the book really takes its time to get us immersed into the world. In the first like third of the book, we stay in the village with the boys, soak in the atmosphere there, and then we're moving on with the plot, with more world building. And it's a fantastic series. I'm really impressed with that. It was a 4-star read for me. I'm really looking forward to get into the next books of the series. I think it's planned to be like a 5-book series, and the first 3 are out. This one is on the less page count side compared to the others. It's like 500 plus pages, and I think the second has more than 800 pages, and the third has something ridiculous of 1,400 pages. There's also novellas in this series out there that seem to be really good when I go by the statement of other reviewers. So this could be, it's not a series that's on my 10 series I want to finish in 2024, but it could be like a dark horse to achieve that as well. So these were the 8 books I've read in January. Next week I think we're going to talk about not a February TBR, but my approach to reading, because I'm reading 24 books at the same time. So these 8 books were not everything that I've read in January, but these were the books I finished in January. And we will talk a little bit about these 24 books that I'm reading, why I'm reading 24 books, how that works, and what this is all about. So look forward to that, and until then I hope that you get bitten by a really good book too. Bye. This is very traditional fantasy, which is done with all the modern twists that you would expect, like pacing, narrative frame, like the approach to characters. YouTubers Live.